Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Major General Sayyid Khalid Amir Jafri, President, Center for Global and Strategic Studies, Ambassador Abdul Basit, Mr. Ahmed Bilal Sufi, former Federal Law Minister, Dr. Muhammad Khan, participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It's a very timely conference because today the results of the Indian elections are being announced, and as General Jafri said, that early indications are that BJP is winning with a thumping majority, and Congress, main opposition party, and the alliance that it represents trails behind. My instant reaction was that the Western countries would welcome this development. When there are election campaigns in India, they usually make noises, raise objections, but once a party like the BJP wins convincingly, they endorse not only the party's elections, of course they have no choice, but to endorse its agenda also. This has happened in the past as well. Now, the topic given to me was that Kashmir is the pivot of India-Pakistan crisis. And I have replaced the word pivot with the root cause, because pivot has some positive connotations. And we can't associate those positive connotations with the Kashmir dispute. So it's the root cause between India and Pakistan. But there are many other causes. I'll come to the root cause a little later. The first is the creation of Pakistan, because India up to this day, and particularly extremists who are ascendant in India today, do not accept the creation of Pakistan in their heart. And therefore, they think that this is their responsibility to correct this historical wrong. I'm talking about the BJP, I'm talking about RSS, which is the parent organization of the Bharatiya Janata Party, about Bajrang Dal, about Shiv Sena and other extremist organizations. So in their heart of hearts, the Indians think that this was a cardinal sin which was committed against Akhand Bharat or Bharat Bhumi, and therefore Pakistan must be punished for that sin, and Indians should atone for that sin by waging a new renaissance for Hinduism and for the consolidation of the entire geographical territory of Akhand Bharat. Now, this is not something theoretical, because you see its manifestations in India every day. I mean, these past years, you've seen that Nathuram Godse, the assassin of Gandhi, was lionized. Then there was this very tall statue of Patel erected in Gujarat. It is a 597-foot statue which has been erected in Gujarat. The messages are that Godse was good, Gandhi was bad, that Patel was a patriot, Nehru was not, and there is discrimination, systematic discrimination against Muslims. And the message there is that Hindus are paragons of purity and Muslims are malich, outsiders. The second grouse or grudge against the Muslims in India and against Pakistan, of course, let me tell you right in the beginning, in the election campaign that was launched and steered by Mr. Modi himself, he designated 3 targets. One was Pakistan as a hostile country, Muslims within India who were perceived and projected as subversive elements within the Indian Union, and third, Kashmiris, which was hostile to India and therefore dubbed as traitors or sympathizers of Pakistan and so on. So the second thing for which Muslims have to pay penance is the Muslim rule, the 1,000 Muslim rule. They think that these were also interventionists, outsiders, imperialists, and therefore there's a revisionist version of history which is being popularized. And in doing so, they're also asking contemporary Muslims to pay for those excesses that were committed by the Muslim rulers, whether they were Turkic or Mughal or others. And the third dimension is that they somehow believe, the Indian politicians, particularly the extremist politicians, they think that Pakistan stands in the way of the great power status of India. And fifth is Pakistan's nuclear status. They have not accepted it fully. It has created a situation of parity between India and Pakistan as far as the strategic realm is concerned. Conventional asymmetry is there, but they have not fully accepted this reality, and they really try to scupper it or scuttle it or neutralize it by many means and by many doctrines. And the sixth reality, of course, is the majoritarianism, Hindu majoritarianism. They said, you were talking about two-nation theory. We will also talk about two-nation theory, but very indirectly, Hindu majoritarianism. We are in majority, we are 80%, and we do not have to be held hostage by the Muslim voters. Now, what are the responses of the Indian society and political elite to these factors that I have counted? There's a tidal wave of violent extremism in India, and as I said earlier, it is targeting Pakistan, Muslims, and Kashmiris. We all have heard about this excessive militant Gau Raksha campaign, cow protection, Ghar Wapsi, which is they are forcing poor, marginalized Muslims to reconvert to Hinduism. There's also this love jihad troll. They say that Muslims are marrying Hindu girls to convert them to Islam. And there are restrictions on prayers in open places. And in one instance, a family was beaten up because the boys of the family were playing cricket on the day of Holi. And they thought that this was a sacrilege of sorts. Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in her report, which she presented to the Human Rights Council earlier this year, she recorded her concern, and she says that there is increasing harassment and targeting of Muslims in India. Now, what was the election campaign? Let's talk about the election campaign. I think that basically, there were many domestic issues, of course, about farmers, about jobs, unemployment, and so on. But the external, foreign, or religious agenda that dominated was demonization of Muslims in Pakistan and Kashmiris. And this campaign saw a very loud anti-Muslim vitriolic campaign against Muslims. Pakistan was projected as an arch enemy, Indian Muslims as not patriots, and Kashmiris, as I mentioned earlier, as traitors. They also, in their manifesto, threatened to or committed to repeal Articles 370 and 35A. Now, I have given this background to all of you to enable us to look at the big picture. This phenomenon that you see in India is not just confined to India. There's a rise of ethno-nationalism and ultra-nationalism in the United States of America, in Europe, in the Middle East. And because of this ethno-nationalism, they too would support India, because this is now becoming a global phenomenon, Islamophobia or these extremist instances of ethnic nationalism. They will, so we have to grasp this reality. The reality is that the West would tolerate India's crimes against humanity in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. They would tolerate xenophobia and instances of incitement to hatred, which are all violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The second point that I want to emphasize is that what you have seen in India is not a transient phenomenon. It is going to be an enduring phenomenon. So we should brace ourselves to deal with this phenomenon, not just this year or in the next 5-year term, but for decades to come. Let me now turn to Kashmir, which was the subject assigned to me. And I personally believe that Kashmir, or Jammu and Kashmir, the territory, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, was rightfully Pakistan's in 1947. And because of a number of steps that were taken by the Maharaja and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Mr. Patel and the Viceroy of India, this right of Pakistan was denied, and the natural process of integration of Jammu and Kashmir to Pakistan was thwarted by conspiracy, by all the actors that I have already mentioned, by political maneuvering, by legal deceit, because by the illegal transfer of the Muslim majority areas in the Gurdaspur district to India, by mobilization of troops between June 1947 to November or October 1947, thousands of troops from East Punjab and Kapurthala were moved into Kashmir in civilian clothes to prepare for the occupation. And finally, there was the occupation, armed occupation of the territory. I simply believe that at that time, historically speaking, Pakistan was robbed of Kashmir, and Kashmiris' demand for realization of their self-determination or aspirations for statehood were denied to them. Now let me talk about the centrality of the Kashmir issue for India and Pakistan, or India and Pakistan crisis as it was called. In 1947-48, a war was fought between India and Pakistan on Kashmir, and that was the casus belli, or the cause of war. And up to this day, Kashmir is the casus belli, militarily speaking. There has been no other factor, and this is the ultimate cause of the contention and confrontation and discord between India and Pakistan. Legally, the Indian-occupied Kashmir has a sui generis status. India's acceptance, India's occupation of the territory is a transitional phase, because it has not been, this territory has not been integrated with the Indian Federation or with the Indian state in accordance with international law. Legally, Kashmir is not India's part, let alone integral part. India does have de facto control over the territory, but it doesn't have or enjoy a de jure capacity or status. After occupation, India has exercised what may be called by a lawyer or a legal expert is occupational constitutionalism. There's something called colonial constitutionalism. This is occupational constitutionalism to expand its foreign domination and control to the occupied territory through a series of legal mechanisms and processes across time that institute a state of emergency and permanent crises in Kashmir. Then there's multilateral diplomacy, which kicked in later when the Security Council of the United Nations took cognizance of the issue, and they mandated that a plebiscite should be held in the Jammu and Kashmir territory to ascertain the wishes of the Kashmiri people. The aggrieved parties, which is Pakistan and the Kashmiris They were aggrieved because they were denied their rights, both Pakistan and Kashmiris. We accepted that decision in good faith. And we uphold that or endorse that decision up to this day. Whereas India first accepted that decision and then reneged on it. And therefore the aggressor basically rejects this fair dispensation which was given to India, Pakistan, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir. India later on said that the elections to the Constituent Assembly or the elections that they held in the 50s constituted a substitute for the UN Security Council resolutions or for a plebiscite, because they said that by participating in these elections, Kashmiris had exercised their right to self-determination. But this has been rejected explicitly by Resolutions 91 and Resolution 122 of the Security Council. Now, let me compare and contrast the approaches that we have between the two countries. India's approach is coercive, ours is diplomatic. We are extending diplomatic and political support to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, in the past we have fought wars with India over Kashmir. Yes, in the past we also deployed asymmetric assets in Kashmir. But right now we are supporting political and diplomatic movement in Kashmir. India, on the other hand, relies on four things. One is, or it has unleashed 3 wars against Pakistan, and I'll allude to the fourth one. One is a war against the people of Indian-occupied Kashmir, and we consider that potentially this IOK, this territory, is Pakistan's territory. So they are our citizens. So that war is also against the state of Pakistan. Second, they are hostile fire across the LOC, where they kill Azad Kashmiri citizens and our armed personnel, destroy their houses, destroy their livestock and their crops, and their violations of ceasefire cause havoc. And the third is proxy war against Pakistan, against all parts of Pakistan. And the fourth war that they have unleashed and they boast about is the hybrid war. It is very fashionable to talk about hybrid war these days, but I don't want to go into detail. The fifth dimension is the nuclear war, a potential nuclear war between India and Pakistan. And I'd say if there's ever a war between India, if there's ever a war escalating or spiraling to the nuclear level, the trigger would be Kashmir. You would never know when a conventional engagement would cross a certain sensitive threshold and would lead to a nuclear Armageddon or nuclear exchange. Scientists and analysts have conducted some studies, and they say that, hypothetically speaking, if 15 kiloton bombs of the size of the little boy that was used in Hiroshima are used by India and Pakistan for 10 to 15 days, 20 million people in India and Pakistan would die instantly, 50 million in the coming days, and 2.5 billion people of the world would be affected directly or indirectly because of these fine particles which would be released into the atmosphere and stratosphere because of radiation. There would be refugee outflows. There would be a cancer pandemic. There would be change in weather patterns, and there would be global recession. Now, let me tell you, we've talked about the centrality of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute to India-Pakistan relationship, if you can call it a relationship. Both extremists and moderates don't get it right. Extremists, Modi or his national security advisor, they have a 3-point agenda. Kill Kashmiris brutally so that you subjugate them. Second, don't talk to them in the political idiom. Third, close all the doors for talks with Pakistan. They don't get it right. Then there are moderates like Yashwant Sinha Or Chidambaram. Yashwant Sinha says that, in fact, the muscular policy of BJP or Narendra Modi is not working in Kashmir. And he says that Narendra Modi is pursuing a doctrine of brute force there. And Chidambaram also not only agrees, he warns India, the ruling party, of its muscular militaristic policy, and says that there should be some sort of engagement. The terms that they use, their perception is that the problem is of mismanagement, that just mismanaging affairs in Kashmir. What they do not know, and mismanaging affairs in a province, what they do not recognize is that the root cause of all the problems in Kashmir is self-determination, and it has political roots. So when the so-called moderates criticize the BJP government, I always feel that Congress has been no less ruthless towards the Kashmiris. And it's like the pot calling the kettle black. As a matter of fact, their periods of ascendancy have also been ruinous for the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So what they do not recognize are the realities on the ground. And the realities on the ground are, one, occupation and oppression, and that the seedbed for freedom in IOK, Indian Occupied Kashmir, is political. I can also establish by quoting facts and figures given by the Indian security or Indian occupation forces in IOK and in Delhi, that Pakistan right now is not interfering inside IOK militarily. One is the fence, second is their own claims, the claims of the Indian officials, Indian military officials, that last year, 2018, for instance, they eliminated 276 militants out of a total number of 500. And they say that this year, 2019, they would eliminate the rest. They also boastfully claim that nobody dares cross this impregnable line of control fence. And if anybody does that, he is eliminated in the hinterland. Now, I think that General Jaffrey alluded to the horrendous human rights situation prevalent in the Indian occupied Kashmir right now. I can give you all sorts of figures, but let me depict a day for you. There are these ruthless cordon and search operations in which young men are being targeted, houses are being destroyed, these transformers are being damaged, and our leaders have been incarcerated, and they have been sent to the notorious Tihar jail in Delhi. And in Delhi, you have Mr. Yasin Malik, Mr. Shabir Shah, Asya Indrabi, and her two associates. They are there. They are being tortured. And all political activists in the Indian occupied Kashmir are detained. Then they are tortured. Then they are killed. Thousands are disappeared every year. And you find these unmarked graves. So there is a human rights crisis there. Now, I use this platform to condemn all these detentions and persecution of the Kashmiris through the National Investigation Agency. Women are being raped, crops and orchards are being burnt, and businesses are being ransacked, and vehicles have been burnt. So Kashmiris are aliens and slaves in their own homeland. Mr. Yasin Malik already has a very, very fragile health, and he is being tortured, and God forbid something even more serious happens to him. I also condemn this ban on the JKLF and the Jamaat-e-Islami. I'm coming to the concluding part of my presentation. And here are some operative points that I want to share with you. The first is that make Pakistan a strong nation. This is self-evident, but I reiterate it. I think that General Jaffrey alluded to it. The onus is on us to make Pakistan a strong nation because we introduced this dialectic in the subcontinent. We said that Muslims will have a separate homeland, that this would be an ideal homeland, and the value systems that we would adopt would be emulated by other nations. Make Pakistan a strong nation, strategically, politically, economically, and make economic development an absolute priority. This is a strategic priority, because if Pakistan is weak economically, our struggle for Kashmir would suffer grievously. I would say spend more on defense and national security, not less, because there would be some people who would say that India has become so strong, India's growth rate is robust, India's conventional arsenal is growing, so just capitulate and focus on your economy. No, you won't be able to develop your economy if you do not have a defense muscle. And if you do not have sufficient strength for upholding and underpinning your national security. Work on national unity. I would say that you can't achieve national unity by hectoring or lecturing or shaming other people that so and so is not patriotic and so is not nationalistic. For God's sake, unity is crafted by states, and that's why you need statesmen and you need leaders who would craft that kind of unity among diverse and disparate segments of society which exist in all the states, all federal states. Statecraft is required to forge national unity. Then I would say that it looks likely that on Modi's watch, space for bilateral diplomacy would shrink further. And therefore, my advice to everybody is, here in Islamabad, to the decision makers, to all the stakeholders, is put Kashmir back on the multilateral agenda. That's very important, because if you do not go to the international forums, whether it is the United Nations or international parliaments or interparliamentary union, or to the international civil society or to international media networks, then you are in fact doing India's bidding, which is to bilateralize the issue. And India wants a bilateral paradigm to be accepted by Pakistan, because when they sit across the table bilaterally, they do not address the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. They evade it. They parry all questions about Kashmir when they are sitting across the table on Kashmir. So I'll come to that point. Then, taking advantage of your presence, sir, I would say that in our traditional diplomacy, we must incorporate lawfare. And you've been talking about lawfare in your previous presentations. And why? Because Indians are very, very smart in lawfare. I'll give you an example. The Kulbhushan Yadav case, very clear case. But they have complicated it by taking it to the ICJ. And they have, here you have a person who has acted against the interests of Pakistan illegally. He's an external, a foreign agent. He's been captured in our land. But India very deftly and skillfully has hidden behind some international covenants. It has invoked those international covenants. Now, after having done that, what do? They buy time. Straight Pakistan's clear-cut legal agenda. The second example is while we were very successful in our the 27th of February operations, India attacked us, India committed aggression against Pakistan, and after having done that, we retaliated with confidence, demonstrating unity, exuding confidence, and then our response was civil and proportionate. We were not warmongers. We did not want to whip up anger and war hysteria. So this is what we did. The world recognized that here is a civilized society which is capable of defending its national interests. But what happened later on? Lawfare. India first accuses Pakistan of being responsible for a false flag operation in Pulwama. We didn't know what happened there. There's no evidence, no substantiation, no investigation. And after it happened, there was somebody from Pakistan representing Jaish-e-Mohammed who accepted responsibility. And then the Indians connect instantly while this thing was unfolding, and we didn't have all the details, said that Pulwama was connected to Jaish-e-Mohammed, and then they took it to the Security Council. And in the Security Council, they built up pressure on the Permanent Five, particularly on China, that China was forced to withdraw its hold on Masood Azhar. They connected 3 dots. And then they started saying that yes, Pakistan was responsible for sponsoring terrorism. My last 3 points, as a matter of fact. First is that I'm not advocating a rash response to the developments in India. What I'm suggesting, everybody, if you go to think tanks or if you go to these discussions, brainstorming sessions, people will tell you what 4th or 5th or 6th generation warfare is, what hybrid warfare is, what India is doing. We come up with an inventory. That is one level, understanding this phenomenon. But more important than that is coming up with a strategy to deal with it. And that is where think tanks like yours, General Jaffrey, can make a huge contribution. Second point that I want to make is that, and for this strategy, I'm telling you, you have to go back to the drawing board and you have to take note of all the variables and constants that are there, and you have to come up with a strategy which would not hurt Pakistan's national interests in the next 2 decades and make Pakistan secure, and at the same time define its policy vis-a-vis India. The last point that I want to make is that we too should become pragmatic. When you become pragmatic in the face of such harsh realities, it doesn't mean that you are giving signals of being weak. You can be strong by being pragmatists also. So I would counsel that while these deliberations, I think that there would be a full session, and I apologize to you that after this presentation I have to leave for another engagement. But what I want to say is that there would be a full session here, that we should in fact come up with a strategy, that how to respond to all these developments that have taken place, in addition to inventorizing our problems. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.